Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I should declare an interest that many members in the Chamber will know. Of course, my husband Hans is German and has worked as a GP in Scotland for over 30 years, looking after Scottish people when they were ill, as indeed have many migrants from all sorts of places, not just Europe, but right across the world. People I worked with as colleagues and friends, people who lived near me as neighbours, and I just follow my colleague in celebrating them. I think there's a failure to recognise the sheer scale of the challenge Scotland faces. Scotland is 1/3 of the UK landmass. It is enormous. I know that on the weather map it looks small, but it isn't. It's actually huge. And the James Hutton Institute points out that half of that is defined as sparsely populated, and those areas could lose 1/4 of their population by the mid-40s unless action is taken. Now, because of freedom of movement, Scotland did have a growing population for a number of years, but Scottish net migration fell across the EU referendum from 31,500 in 2015 to 21,000 in 2017. That's a fall of 1/3. That is the impact of Brexit, even though we hadn't left. Now, Scotland has faced forced out-migration over centuries, right back to the clearances of the 18th and 19th century, when people were forcibly put on ships and sent elsewhere in the world. As the member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine pointed out, we didn't just lose the individuals who left. We lost their children and grandchildren. We lost generations of people. And as he also mentioned, in 2017-18, there were over 7,500 more deaths than births, and 2018 had the second lowest ever registration of births. So Scotland's natural growth is falling, and all of our population growth over the next 1/4 of a century is expected to come from immigration. Otherwise, we will face a falling working-age population by the mid-2030s that will simply struggle to support our ageing population. He highlighted this demographic time bomb, but I didn't hear him offer a solution. 14 local authorities in Scotland already have a falling population, and that includes my constituency in the southwest of Scotland. The problem is, in the remote and rural areas, it becomes a worsening spiral. You are left with older communities, so young people go on leaving, which means there are fewer children. The population becomes smaller and ages rapidly. These are often stunningly beautiful parts of Scotland, to which people from elsewhere in the UK and Scotland retire. Now, they're very welcome, but unfortunately that actually adds to the problem of ageing, and you can end up with communities that simply do not have enough young people within them to provide the social care or the health or even just the support. Now, the member for Forest of Dean said that Scotland needed to up its GDP growth. That was the issue. But the Fraser of Allender Institute highlighted that GDP growth rates were directly linked to population growth rates. The UK has predicted that its population will grow by over 7% in the coming years. Scotland's will only grow by 1%. And indeed, if action isn't taken, it may start to fall. The Migration Advisory Centre pointed out that EU citizens contributed £2,300 more in tax than natives because they come here after someone else has paid for their education and training. Now, isn't it a pity that report was requested in 2017 and not in 2015 before the EU referendum, where immigration and getting immigration down was made a central plank? The problem we have is that we need young people. We need young migrants into Scotland. People of working age who are low users of welfare, low users of NHS, and are not collectors of pensions. We need to attract them, not just based on a job that they're going to do for a few years, but to settle. That's what points-based systems are about. They're about giving someone quite early on in the process the right to settle and make their life there with their family. That is what Scotland requires. And these people bring diversity and energy and vitality into communities, which actually can help us retain our own young people. At the moment, UK visas are basically based on earnings. So younger people earn less. That's even in the minimum wage, which means they won't qualify for a visa. In rural areas, often salaries are much lower. So rural areas can't attract migrants because of the salary thresholds. It hits key sectors of which Scotland is highly represented, such as tourism, food and drink, agriculture, fishing. Now, I agree it's great to see the seasonal workers' numbers increase from a paltry 2,500 to 10,000. But before they were cut, the UK had 64,000 seasonal workers. And as the member for West Aberdeenshire admitted himself, 70,000 might be a more realistic number. So when on earth will we reach that if we're only reaching 10,000 as a proposal? With fishing, there are many boats tied up on the west coast of Scotland for lack of crew, and that's the need for non-EEA visas, particularly for Filipino fishermen who come here. They don't bring families, they're not looking to settle, but they help provide training to attract in some young people locally from Scotland into the industry. I have written to the Secretary of State in the past, I've written to immigration ministers, it's been discussed in this chamber, having a seafarer's visa. And what we're told each time is we can't have any sectoral visas. So those who've said, oh, let's have sectoral visas, this government has already refused that. In the UK, there has already been 1/4 drop in European doctors coming to the UK since the Brexit referendum, and a 90% drop in European nurses coming, a 1/3 increase in European nurses leaving. In particular, young medical trainees can't come, because if, like me, you're a surgeon, you're committing to a training system that will last between 10 and 14 years. You can move when you're untrained, you can move when you're a consultant, but you can't afford to be kicked out in the middle, and you therefore require long-term security. The Nursing and Midwifery Council point out that 80% of UK-trained nurses are over 50. 72% of EU-trained staff are under 40. The problem is the government are judging on earning. They're judging on money instead of worth. They are not judging on the contribution that people make to the system and to the well-being of their community. The member for North Dorset admitted that you need a range of skills. Now, I can tell you as a surgeon, I need an anaesthetist, but I also need an orderly. I need someone who cleans the theatre. You need everyone. So this narrative of excluding unskilled or only allowing unskilled people to come for a year, who's going to invest in their training? So the UK... No, there isn't time, sorry. The UK government said they wanted a system that would work for all parts of the UK, and yet when the Scottish Government come forward with their proposal, it's refused without even reading it. The member for Streatham highlighted the shortages in other parts of the UK, including the north of England. Well, the Home Secretary said in October that they wanted an extra points into a points-based system to attract people to the north of England and coastal areas. So why refuse to consider a very similar system for Scotland? At the UK level, there's simply no visa which is aimed at settlement, aimed at giving security early on so that people really come and make their homes and their lives here. A points-based system would be based on migrant characteristics, not just having a job. They often quote Canada and Australia, as people have referred to, but the provincial nominee programme allows the province to set the criteria, assess the applicants, and if successful, it is the central government that actually issues the visa. This is a very modest request, supported by Civic Scotland, including the STUC Federation of Small Businesses. It's based on residence, as the Scottish Tax Code already is. It's simply that this modest proposal was not considered. Members are talking about reading it, but they read it after it was refused. I would just gently say you cannot keep a relationship or a marriage together by force. It is by respect and recognition and consideration of someone's needs. Failure to do so ends simply in divorce. Immigration is existential for Scotland, and failing to recognise that means that people in Scotland and businesses in Scotland will see there is only one way for us to get the policies we need.